With the release of the March quarterly inflation number, we now know that your HECS debt will be indexed at 4.7% for 2024. Given we now know what the indexing rate will be, it's prompted me to have a bit of a chat with you about understanding how HECS works, the repayment of it, and maybe what you can do. So HECS or HELP is the government system that allows you to go to tertiary education, do some further studies, but pay for it later on when you have the money to do so when you're working. You don't pay interest on your HECS or HELP debt, it's interest by another means. It's called indexing with inflation. Now, historically, because inflation has been low for many years, your HECS or HELP debt barely went up at all over the years. More recently though, because inflation's been a whole lot higher, your HECS or HELP debt has been indexed at a much higher rate. Last year, for example, 2023, it was north of 7%, and as I just said, it's highly likely that for this year, 2024, your debt will be indexed at a rate of 4.7%. Now, the long-held wisdom when it comes to repayment of your HECS or HELP debt has been don't bother paying it off any more than just what your salary or payroll deductions take from you. There is now no longer a scheme where you can pay lump sums up front and get discounts. They abolished that a little while ago. Now it's just you pay it off through your salary. You can make voluntary repayments, but there's no incentive to make those voluntary repayments anymore. The reason why this long-held wisdom was don't bother paying it off at any faster rate than what your payroll deductions are is because typically the indexing of that debt or the interest rate that is on that debt is highly likely to be lower than any other debt that you may have. Take a mortgage, for example. Most variable mortgage rates at the moment on your home are something like 6%, 6.1, 6.2, something like that. If your HECS or HELP debt is only being indexed at 4.7%, that's a lower interest rate than what your mortgage is. You're better off paying off your mortgage than you are putting money into your HECS or HELP debt. Now, last year, 2023, was a bit of an anomaly because inflation had shot up so much. Your HECS or HELP debt was indexed at a much higher rate than what your mortgage was at the time. It seems as though we're back to the more normal scenario where your mortgage interest rate is highly likely to be higher than the HECS or HELP indexing. You need to understand that your HECS or HELP debt is indexed on the 1st of June each year, but your repayments for how much do you need to put towards your debt are not calculated until you lodge your tax return after the 30th of June. So there's a bit of a mismatch. If you're working and you're having payroll deductions taken from your pay that are going towards your HECS debt, that's coming out, but it's not actually repaying your HECS debt at the moment. The ATO is effectively just holding on to that money. It's sitting in their coffers. It is not being credited towards your HECS or HELP debt. It gets indexed on the 1st of June, whatever your outstanding balance is on the 1st of June. Any deductions that have come from your salary so far this year have not been credited towards that. It gets indexed on the 1st of June. You lodge your tax return at some point after the 30th of June, and then depending on what your tax return says your total income is for the year, there'll be a payment that then needs to be made towards your HECS or HELP debt. You can pause the video, but this is what the repayment rates look like for the current 23-24 financial year. So you don't pay anything until your income is more than $51,550, and then it goes up slowly from there. As I said, it's highly likely the indexing is going to be 4.7%. So if you're earning anything less than $84,400 a year, your debt will be indexed at a higher rate than what you're actually paying it off. There's only the minimum repayments are 2, 2.5, 3, as you can see here. You'll pay a higher rate of indexing than what you're paying it off. It's only if you're earning those higher incomes, I've lost it here. It's only if you're earning those higher incomes that then it starts to pay off at a faster rate. If you're earning north of $151,200, you'll have to pay a minimum of 10% of your salary towards your HECS or HELP debt. Now, if you are going to make voluntary repayments towards your HECS or HELP debt, please do that before the 1st of June. Then that repayment that you're making towards it will help limit the indexing that will happen on your debt anyway. And then for younger people that are maybe going to university for the first time next year, or they're already at university and just trying to understand the longer term ramifications of studying and taking out a HECS or HELP debt, in the long run, it actually really affects your borrowing capacity. And so there's a lot being written about this, and there's a lot of pressure for the government to change the way that this is all assessed, and the banks and so forth. But at least for the time being, as I'm recording this video, that debt that you take out, that HECS or HELP debt that you have for your studying, counts as a debt when you're going to apply for a home loan. So most people, when they're working, they'll pay off their HECS debt or their HELP debt over a period of time. It's unlikely to be hanging around for 30 years if you're working in a full-time job. But the bank doesn't care about that. So Whether you've got a $5,000 debt, a $10,000 debt, or a $150,000 debt, it doesn't really matter in the eyes of the bank. They just reduce your what's called your serviceability, your ability to borrow money, your ability to service the payment of that home loan. They reduce that down because you have this HECS or HELP debt. So a short-term decision around going onto a HECS or HELP debt rather than paying for it up front if you have the means to, and of course not a whole lot of university students have the means to pay for their studies up front. Certainly I didn't when I went through university. So, but if you do have the means to pay it up front, or someone can help you with paying it up front, you want to think about the longer term ramifications, because as I said, at the time being that I'm recording this video, it does have longer term impacts on your ability to borrow money, even when you're looking to buy a house at some point in the future. If you're still carrying that HECS or HELP debt at the time that you're applying for the loan, it will reduce how much the bank is willing to lend you. That then brings up the final point that I want to make in this video about if you are looking at buying your first home, for example, and you're weighing up, do I pay off my HECS or HELP debt so that my serviceability increases, or do I carry my HECS or HELP debt and have this lower serviceability? The answer to that is it's going to depend. Ultimately, there are two factors that will limit how much you can borrow when it comes to buying a house. First is the deposit, the amount of money that you have available to put down as a deposit. And then the second one is your income will limit how much the bank will lend you. So depending on your own unique set of circumstances, it may be that you don't have enough of a deposit, for example, or you only have a small amount of a deposit. And so the limiting factor for you to borrow money to buy a house is the size of your deposit. If that's you, it's probably not a great idea to take some of your savings and pay off your HECS or HELP debt. It's only going to make matters worse for you. If, on the other hand, for some reason you have a whole lot of savings and the deposit isn't so much of an issue, it's the serviceability, it's your income and your ability to service that loan into the future, then maybe if you fall into that category, it may be worthwhile taking some of your savings, wiping out your HECS or HELP debt completely to then increase your serviceability and allow you to borrow that little bit more money to buy the house. As I said, it's going to depend on which side that is. It's going to be unique to you. There is no hard and fast rule that applies for everyone. Hopefully this longer form video, a bit of a deep dive into HECS and HELP is of benefit to you. All the best and good luck if you're trying to make a decision about paying off your debts. Bye.